I like to get started asking you about something good. What is something good that is happening in your life? Maybe you scheduled your test or just something really good that's happened to you recently that you can share just to kind of get us started on a good note. I can go ahead and start. So today I had to make the hard decision, and this is, yeah, the hard decision between going to Hawaii in April for a vacation. I haven't had one in 2 years, or going to Vegas in April for a ninja training. Um, ninja Ninja Spelling is a real estate program for productivity, and the creator of the program is doing this class with 80 people. So I'm going to go to Vegas in April and learn from this ninja guy on selling. So I'm super excited about that. But now I have to move Hawaii to like May or something. So that's my happy. Do you guys have something good you want to share?
I guess I'll go next. um, let's see. Something good.
You don't have to share.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to if you don't want to, or if you don't. But it's kind of nice to look and be like, okay, there's got to be one good thing that's happened to me in the last week.
Right. I mean, this is actually a good thing, get support for real estate, because doing it on my own is definitely difficult.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I wanted to do it like a few years ago when we bought our first home, and I just moved to the US for the first time.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, we basically bought a home after a few months, a few months after I got here. So I wanted to do real estate, but I ended up going to college instead. But now I'm here, so that's a good thing. So I'm just hoping I
Awesome.
could pass my test.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. Where do you live?
I was from Japan,
Oh, nice.
and
Okay.
yeah, yep.
Wow. And then where did you guys choose here?
My husband's in the military, so he got assigned here, and um, yeah, so he moved here before I did, and but as soon as I moved here, we bought a house,
Oh,
and that's
nice.
when got me into it. But I had other stuff to do, so
Got it. Got it.
yeah.
Well, you made it here. What is it like? Everything happens at the right time, or that's not how it goes at all, but that's the gist of it, that things
Close
happen
enough,
when they're supposed to. Yeah.
right?
Alrighty. Joseph, do you have anything that you would like to share with the class? You don't have to.
I have test on Monday night before I'm going out with a friend. We're gonna eat at one of the restaurants at the restaurant I work at on the
Oh,
weekends. So I
nice.
eat all the food to like de-stress.
Awesome. Nice. Awesome. That's great. Okay. So we're going to move through these next few slides kind of quick, as I mentioned. So the first thing I want to touch on are studying tips. And so after doing this for a little over 2 years, I've started to see some patterns in how people study or how they don't study. And so I did a little bit of research and, into college articles and all of that stuff about what is the best way to study to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. So what I found was, and I actually posted this article in the Facebook group, it was probably like 3 months ago. But what I found was that you don't need to spend hours and hours a day studying, which I think most of us know, but not everybody knows. But so if you were able to take just 30 minutes a day, not even a day, but if you're going to sit down and study, being purposeful about the time that you have, and if that is only 30 minutes, going into it with a plan of this is what I'm going to cover, and devoting your time to that and focusing heavily, maybe that's putting your phone in another room, or turning off the notifications on your computer or whatever that might be, so that you are able to focus solely on your studies and not get distracted by all of the things. So with that, I think when you are wrapping up one study session, before you are completely done, make your plan for the next time. And that's actually a really good plan in everything, is the last like 2 or 3 minutes of whatever you're doing. What are you going to do the next time you sit down to study? Or if it's in your business, if you're finishing your day, okay, what are my 2 or 3 things that are my top priorities that I need to do the next day? So just having a plan and using your time purposefully. With that too, having a study guide is a big thing. Knowing what information you do need to focus on. So I do have a study guide that I'll upload in a little bit so that you guys can use that and not have to reinvent the wheel. So if you are scheduling your test for the first time, when you get done with school, about 24 hours after finishing school, you'll get an email from EMP PSI inviting you to schedule your exam. I have a list up there of the the closest locations in the Puget Sound area, depending on where you live. And there are others in more outlying areas, but the only reason you would really need to look out there is if you have your heart set on a specific date, or you have a goal of getting schooling done and testing done by a certain time. If the center closest to you doesn't have availability, maybe look at going a little bit further than you would have originally planned. So as I mentioned, you have to be done with all of your coursework, submitting your quizzes. You'll get that invitation, and then the cost to schedule your exam is $138.25. So you do want to plan for that. On the exam itself, there's a total of 135 questions. 100 of them are 100 of them are the national portion, 30 of them are for the state, and then 5 are trial questions used to practice for future versions of the exam. Those 5 trial questions are not graded. So to get all of that done, you have 3.5 hours. I think I've heard of one person who ran out of time, but I do think that that was a very rare exception. So don't feel pressed for time. You should have plenty, more than you need. So when you sit down, or when you get in there, you're going to have a little cubicle area with a computer. The only thing they're going to allow you to have is scratch paper that they will provide for you, as well as a little golf pencil so that you can take notes or work through math problems. As soon as you're done with the exam, you'll get your results. It takes a minute or 2 for it to process. They'll print off a blue sheet of paper, and that will tell you if you passed or failed. It is possible to pass one section and fail the other. If you pass, they will not give you your score. If you fail, they will give you your score along with a breakdown of the section, so you can see which sections you need to work more on to pass the next time. And then if you do only pass one portion, you need to pass the other portion within 6 months. And if you don't, you will need to take both portions again. When you reschedule, if you have to reschedule, it is $138.25 for each testing attempt. On the day of your exam, you will need to bring with you 2 forms of ID, your driver's license and your a credit card, something with your signature. So with your ID, if your name does not match, if your name on your ID does not match the name that you register for your exam with, they can turn you away. And when you go to do your fingerprinting, which we'll touch on in a minute, they will not accept that. So particularly if either of the women on this call have gotten married, changed their last name, something like that, the name on your license must match the name on your testing papers. Yeah, Joseph.
Also, I mean, knowing that I've been to this test only several times, never argue with the proctor, no matter how anyone feels and no matter what Google reviews says, because I've had people in front of me where they're just arguing and I'm like, okay, I get it, but can I just take my test? And that you're not gonna, and the argument cannot be won.
Right. I agree with that for sure. Um, so yeah, make sure you have those 2 forms of ID, one with a photo, one with a signature. And then the only thing that you will be able to take into the room with you is a basic calculator, like a dollar store calculator. Everything else they're going to take away from you, secure it in a like a backpack or a locker. They'll take watch, everything. So make sure the layer of clothing that's closest to your body is something you're comfortable wearing. I'm wearing this like cape thing today, and I'm pretty confident they would want me to take this off and just wear my t-shirt, which would be freezing. So just kind of think about that kind of stuff. And then you're not able to bring in any like reusable water bottles. Some places will let you use a single use. And then just some exam basics. Make sure you're getting a good night's sleep. Make sure you have gas in your car. You know where you're going. Plan ahead and be early, because if you are a minute late, they do not have to let you in. So some tips and tricks for passing the test. I do have these in the packet I'm going to upload for you. My best advice though is to slow down and read the questions. And I can't emphasize that enough. I think that trips up a lot of people is, reading a question with the assumption that it's similar to a question they've seen before, and answering questions when they see the right answer. Kind of skimming them. Oh, that's the word association I'm looking for. When those questions aren't designed to necessarily have one right answer. A lot of questions do have more than one answer that are correct. And part of the test is you being able to decipher which one is the most right. And you won't catch that unless you're carefully reading the question, reading all 4 answers. So I can't stress that enough. Plus how frustrating if you fail the exam because you didn't read it, so slow down and read it. And then with going back and changing your answers, so I would not suggest going back at all and reviewing what you had put down. You are able to flag questions that you skip, and go back, pick those up and answer them later, but just be careful of reviewing or double checking your answers unless like later you're like, oh man, I totally put the wrong answer, unless you just like kind of know in your gut. But usually if you go back and review it, you're going to pick the wrong answer. So just trust your instincts. All right, so for math tips, I did kind of summarize a little bit of the capitalization rate, discount points, mills. I do not have this in the packet, although actually I do have this in the packet. The only thing I don't have in the packet is the information on mills. The part down here where I spelled mills wrong. This isn't in that packet. But this next slide, I think you should take a picture of. So these are the things that you need to have memorized when it comes to math so that you can do well on that section of the test. Having these formulas memorized, having these conversions memorized are going to be really important. There are no cheat sheets. They don't provide any information to you aside from an amortization table if you have a math problem looking for the PITI, like the monthly payment. So you do need to know these by heart, have them memorized, because they will account for approximately 5 questions on the exam, which isn't a ton, but you do need 70% to pass. So every chance, if this is something that, never mind, just memorize them. Sorry. All right, so I mentioned we would talk about fingerprints. So The process of getting licensed is different, a bit different than how it's explained in the material you've been learning. So I don't want to confuse you, but I also want you to know what's coming next. So after you take your test, it's going to take about 3 days for PSI to communicate with the DOL that you passed your exam. And that's business days. They don't work on the weekends. So after 3 business days, the DOL and PSI should have communicated, and then they'll have on record that you passed. And so in order to actually apply for your license, they need to have that passing record. And then they also need to have your background check and fingerprints completed. So the processing on this takes about 2 weeks, and they are taking a full 2 weeks right now. And I got information today, and actually I haven't told anybody. I haven't even told anybody I work with, none of them. So you guys are the first ones to hear the awful news that the DOL is drastically like reducing the amount of people they have working there. They've been bringing on like virtual assistants, sort of in a way, that have been working there. And so these processing times are probably going to increase in about 2 weeks. So what I would suggest is get your fingerprints and your background check done now. Because then if it does take a month to process, not saying that it will, I don't want to freak you out. I'm not saying it'll take that long, but you never know. And then you just have this done. They'll have them stored away virtually somewhere, and then it'll all connect on the back end once you pass your exam. And yeah, and then just keep record of when you got your fingerprints done. You'll never hear anything from them unless it's bad news. So you know if you've got bad news in your past. So if you don't hear anything, you're good. So don't expect a response. So again, that website to do that is identigo.com. I would not call anybody if you didn't have to throughout this process, unless it's me, because some of these hold times. So identigo.com is going to cost you $42.80. And again, you need to have passed your test and your results need to be in the system before you're able to get licensed. And until both of those things are done, and you pay the fee to the DOL for $146.25 for your actual license, you're not able to market yourself as a real estate agent or tell anybody that you're a realtor yet until all of those things are done. Any questions about anything that I covered so far? Okay. All right, so I would strongly suggest taking a picture or a screenshot or whatever of this slide. I do have a version of this in the packet I'm going to give you. I need to update that packet. There's just only so many hours in the day. But so what this is a breakdown of all of the questions that are on the exam so that you guys know which topics are of the highest priority. National on the left with the highest number of questions being contracts with 17 questions. So you can see like those top 4, 5, 6 categories, those are going to be the ones you really want to make sure that you're studying the most. Whereas when you get down that list, it's great to know that stuff, but it's not going to help you as much as mastery of these will. And then over here on the right, the state portion questions are there. Those are all broken down as well. So you can see, again, what you should focus on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a second and upload that packet to the chat. So that'll take a moment to load up. And in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen so we can kind of go through this together. really quick. Okay. Can you guys see this all right? All right, I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right, so again, this packet is in the chat. So this is the same breakdown of test questions that was on that slide. This is just how it was provided to me. Well, not to me, to everybody from AMP PSI. So this information comes directly from the testing facilitator on their website. So I didn't, magically come by this or make it up or anything like that. It is legitimately from them. And it's just a really commonly overlooked thing on their site. They kind of have it buried away. So down here at the bottom of this page, this is going to be your study guide for the state portion of the exam. These are the topics that were on that list, that simplified list I had on the slide. And then it further breaks down what is considered a general rule, like what exactly is going to be covered in these 4 to 5 questions. And yes, there's a whole lot more here than 4 to 5 categories to pull questions from. So you do have to know pretty much everything you've learned so far. But this at least gives you a direction when you are sitting down to study. So you can pull this up and be like, all right, I'm going to do state tonight. And maybe you don't even do all of state. Maybe you're just doing these 13 questions because you have half an hour. And then you focus in and go line by line, make sure you're covering each one of these, make sure you're understanding them, not just reading the material, but really understanding how that might apply to a situation or a scenario. Oftentimes information, when we read it or when it's shared with us, isn't retained nearly as much unless it's in a story format where it's a little bit more intriguing for our brains. So maybe some of these you create stories about how they would work, and we can dive into that a little bit later, but just different ways of getting the information in your brain. Anyhow, these will be the things that you do want to zero in on, so then you're able to focus your efforts a bit more. And then on the next 2 pages of this packet, I have the same thing for the national portion of the exam. Each of those categories that were broken out have their subcategories listed, making it hopefully a lot easier for you to know what exactly you need to be covering. And then a summary of the information where we went over the tips and the tricks for passing. So you have all of that noted. And then here, the math need to know down at the bottom so that you have that reference. So with the days in the month, the reason I have it noted there that you will need to know that is because we will have tax proration problems on the test. I don't know if they'll be the kind where you prorate them by month, like where you're dividing by 12, or where you're doing a per diem, dividing them by day. But if it is per diem, you need to know how many days there are in each month. And I, like 2 weeks ago, had somebody on my test prep who told me this amazing trick that got me so dorkily excited. But you put your knuckles up and you have them looking at you, not look at your knuckles. And so the high knuckles are the months with 31 days and the low knuckles are the other months. So like you have January, my knuckle doesn't come up, but January, February, March, April, May, June, July. And then you put your hands together and then it's July, August, because they both have 31 days. So then you can use your knuckles as kind of a cheat sheet. I thought that was brilliant. And I'm going to definitely be sharing that with everybody in the future. I cannot see the chat. Oh. sorry. All right. So, and then up at the top here, I have like a fill in the blank little cheat sheet. On the left, when I was in school, for some reason, my brain just didn't wrap itself around the givers or the lessors, lessees, vendors, vendees, which one was which. And so just oversimplifying it for my own sanity, I broke them into givers and takers. Basically who was giving the property, who was taking the property. And that was just super helpful for me to see, oh, all of the ors are the givers, all of the e's are like the takers or the buyers. Except for the situation of mortgagee and mortgagor, they are flipped. But yeah, I just found this helpful when remembering those scenarios. And then here I have tips and tricks, or excuse me, I have a spreadsheet of the different loan types. And then I purposely left some of those answers blank so you can fill them in and just get more familiar with those loan types. Advice from agents who joined our office fairly recently, what they did to pass the exam. Hopefully some advice that'll help you. And then some additional resources here on the back, as well as my contact information. So that was a little bit longer than I anticipated talking about that. Did everybody get the packet okay?
I got the packet, but for some reason when I opened it and then download it to my computer and then I open it again, it didn't work. So I'm gonna try the one that you resent to me.
Okay.
So hopefully it works.
I will, I have it as a link as well. Give me just a second and I'll drop that link in the chat since that should definitely get you to where you can download it. Give me just a second. While I'm doing that, does anybody have anything in particular that you're struggling with that you'd like me to talk about? What can I help you with tonight with we got 25 more minutes.
If nobody
Don't all speak
minds
at once.
contracts,
Sorry, go ahead, Joseph.
if nobody else minds contracts, but if anyone else has a different topic of consideration, I won't be opposed either.
Contracts is the largest portion of the entire exam with 17 questions. So that would be a good one. How do you guys feel about that? We good?
I know the essentials.
All right, we're going to do contracts then. Let me my book.
I'm good with that too.
All right. All right. So.
Oh, let me get my stuff because I'm kind of I'm in a meeting right now anyway.
All right. So when I go to do this, I do the same thing I tell you guys to do. To get out this sheet and follow it along. So that's actually what I'm going to do is just share that again so that we can just go by topic together, or subtopic, I should say, under contracts. Okay. So contracts is over here. I wonder if I'm able to. Oh. Okay. She's not pretty, but that's helpful. At least for me, it's helpful. Oh no. Okay. Is that any better? Can you guys hear me any better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I've been having so much trouble. I wish I was more tech savvy. Okay. All right. So let's dive into contracts. If you went to Rockwell, that's chapter 6. So we are going to start general knowledge of contract law with requirements for validity. All right, so there are 4 elements that make a contract valid. And actually, before I dive into that, I think something that is helpful when you're learning about contracts and trying to commit this to memory is that this isn't specific to real estate. All of this information in this section A, this is general contracts. We're talking about car purchases, if you're drawing up a contract between 2 business partners, this applies to every contract out there. So I think that when you look at it through that lens, it makes it a little bit more relatable, especially if real estate is completely new to you. You've probably entered into another sort of contract at some point. So let's dive in. So requirements for validity. So in order for a contract to hold up in court, there are 4 things that it's required to have. And little trick question on this one is, in Washington state, there is a 5th. So we're going to start with the 4 main elements. So those are capacity, mutual consent, lawful objective, and consideration. So capacity means being of age to enter into a contract and or being mentally competent enough to enter into that contract. So someone who is not 18 is able to enter into a legal contract. They of course need to have a guardian who signs as well, but they are able to still purchase a home, buy a car, enter into those contracts. So not being 18 years old is not necessarily disqualify someone from having capacity, but they would need to have that guardian. And then as far as competency with capacity, not being, having any one of the many, conditions that can affect people as far as their judgment or ability to make decisions, and enter into contracts. So being free of anything that might negate their competence in that way, as well as temporary incompetence. So if somebody was drunk or if they were on drugs, it is possible that the contract could be rescinded later or deemed to be invalid because that person was incapacitated at the time of signing the contract. That same could go for like temporary insanity or, and then of course, major things like if they are legitimately insane or have, degenerative disease or something like that. And then the next one is mutual consent. I feel like this spans all sorts of things. I trust that all of us understand what mutual consent is. It goes into more detail about, being free of any sort of undue influence, people trying to pressure a family member or, somebody who might be weaker than them into selling, like not, physically forcing them, but giving them, again, undue influence, trying to take a little bit of control over their actions in selling that property. So it goes into those negative influence, fraud, constructive fraud, and I think that we circle back to that under another point. So we'll get back to that. And then lawful objective, you cannot have a contract that holds up in court that does not have a legal subject. So if you have a contract with your crack dealer, the court is not going to uphold that, even if it has all of these other elements. So your basis of the contract must be legal. And then the last one of the 4 is consideration. And so that means there must be an exchange of goods or services. It does not have to be money. Nowadays it is money, but in other parts of the world, or even back in the day, it may have been a trade of animals or labor in exchange for property. And then the 5th one, the one that is valid in Washington State, is a writing requirement. In Washington State, because of the statute of frauds, a contract not in writing is not considered valid. So that covers everything. I mean, like I said, this isn't just real estate law, cars, mortgages, business agreements, all of that. Any questions on that first one? Okay. So factors affecting enforceability of contracts. I've always been a little bit unclear on exactly what they're asking about on this one, because I go through everything else and I feel like I've covered it all, especially because the next question asks specifically about void, voidable, and unenforceable. So I do typically believe that this is the portion that if you went to Rockwell in this book, it's covered. Ooh, here. Oh no, this book. On page 83 and 84, they discuss a little bit more about enforceability. So I will dive into that. So with the process of the contract being accepted and then of course enforceable, with that, there are requirements for an offer to be written for the property with clear terms, including a price and a date for closing the transaction. And then when that offer is made, there, you can go back and forth with counter offers, which we'll get into, multiple offers, all of that. And then it talks about how an offer can be discharged or how those offers are canceled. So when you represent a buyer and they find a property that they want to purchase, you're going to first start with writing up what they're willing to pay for it. But if you get into the business anytime soon, you are going to experience our insane market where sometimes you're going to end up being one of 10 offers on a property. I'm sorry, I'm plugging in my computer while I'm doing this, or while I'm speaking. So you're going to get into a situation where you might have more than one offer, or you might end up finding another property really quickly after you wrote another offer and need to get out of that situation. So how that works is if you represent the buyer and you write an offer on a home, and then they're like, you know what, we found this other one. Let's take a look at it. You go show them that house. They absolutely love it, but they already have an offer in on another home. So you can't write an offer on another home while you have an offer out at that same time. Because what happens if both offers get accepted? Unless your buyer can buy both houses, you're in a really bad situation. So you can terminate an offer or cancel the offer that you wrote, so long as the other agent has not said they accepted your offer. So you can revoke it, providing the form that says, we take it back, our offer's off the table, and then also with the deadlines. So when you write an offer, you put an acceptance date on there, expiration date, when that offer no longer is valid. So through that date, it can automatically cancel your offer as soon as that expires. So that is 2 different ways to do it. Another way is, well, okay, that was horribly worded. This isn't a way to cancel the offer, but if this situation were to arise, it would result in the offer being terminated. So if the person writing the offer dies, then, or they're declared incompetent, then the offer can be terminated as well. And then again, we'll get into counteroffers in a minute, but if a counteroffer is written by the seller, again, you're representing the buyer in the situation. If the seller writes a counteroffer, that effectively cancels the original offer and creates a new one, giving you an opportunity to reject that counteroffer and move on with another property. Okay. Void, voidable, unenforceable, and contracts. So void is no contract at all. It's as if the contract never existed. This might be a offer that isn't signed by anybody, or it's something that is missing one of the valid elements that we just covered. So a void offer is no offer at all, or void is no contract at all, however. Voidable is a contract that has the ability to be voided. So you kind of a little bit of wordplay there. So this would be if you entered into a contract with somebody who was underage, although with a guardian, they can legally enter into that contract. If they later decide to back out, they have that ability due solely to their age. So a contract with a minor or somebody who was temporarily incapacitated, if someone was, completely drunk when they signed an offer or decided to purchase a property, and then, a few days later when they come out of it, they realize that was actually a really good move. It doesn't necessarily immediately void the offer, but it makes it voidable if the party that didn't have capacity did not want to move forward. So as a seller, you can't cancel the offer or the contract based on that. However, the buyer in that situation could. And then an unenforceable contract is one that can't be proven in court. And so what that usually boils down to is one of three things. If they can't prove the contents of the contract, which is usually an oral contract, and it may not be the entire contract. It could be that you had your whole contract done, and at some point there was an oral agreement for something in addition to your basic contract. It may be that just that portion of the agreement is unenforceable while all the rest is good, if you didn't document that. The other way a contract can be unenforceable is if the other party has a voidable contract. So in the example of a 17-year-old purchasing a home, if they would have a voidable contract, which if they did void it, it would be unenforceable. Does that make sense? I'm going to say that one more time. So if somebody were 17, or if they were completely drunk when they entered into a contract and later decided they wanted to get out of that contract, it would make it a voidable contract and also unenforceable after they voided it. And then the third way a contract can be unenforceable is if the statute of limitations has expired, meaning that a contract is enforceable for 6 years from the breach of contract. So if one of the parties did something wrong or didn't do something that they were supposed to, and the other party doesn't sue until 6 years and a day later, it's too late. They should have sued them sooner. And then the last one, we already went over valid. Valid means all of the essential elements are there. No reason to not recognize that contract as valid. Rights and obligations of parties to a contract. So the rights and obligations of all the parties are to make time of time of the essence, you know, to be aware of all of the timelines that are happening throughout the contract and honoring those. When you enter into a purchase and sale agreement for a property, that's a bilateral contract, which means that both parties have things that they need to do. For a buyer, that might be getting an inspection, getting all of his documentation to his lender so that they can get all of the finances taken care of. For the seller, that would be getting all their stuff out of the house, you know, making sure that, you know, the place is clean for when the new buyers move in. You know, they all have their marching orders. So being aware of those timelines and doing those things within the requirements is definitely an obligation on each side. I feel like they don't really dive into that very much. Other than that, really, just being aware of time is of the essence. Abiding by timelines, being aware of each step that each party needs to accomplish in order to keep the contract from being breached. Executory and executed contracts. This one's easy, hopefully. So executory is a contract that is in the process of being performed. So that would be one like an agreed or a mutually accepted offer where both parties are on board, contracts moving forward. An executed contract is one where all parties have performed their duties and it has closed as well, it has closed and everybody's moved on. So executed, it's in the past, it's already happened. Executory, the contract is in the process of being carried out. All right, notice, delivery, and acceptance of contracts. All right. So with this, they cover how you have to send in your contract. Gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. I'm like having the worst like brain moments tonight. And I am completely spacing on this one. Notice, delivery, and acceptance of contracts. I mean, I know that they cover, you know, which ways are acceptable to send a contract. And when you have mutual acceptance, you know, notifying the other agent immediately, getting that contract sent over to them, and that delivery of the contract is not valid unless you also include the brokerage on that communication. So ensuring that delivery is made not only to the other agent, but also to their brokerage. Yeah, I'm going to move on from that one before I say anything that might be confusing, because I can't wrap my brain around that at the moment. So breach of contract and remedies for breach. So breach of contract is breaking the contract. There are many ways that you can do that. So when a client breaches the contract, this could be either party who doesn't have a legal excuse for why they aren't performing their duty. So this would be if a buyer got cold feet and they had maybe already done the inspection on their property, their financing was all moving forward, everything looked great there, like they had no like get out of jail free card or no contingency that would allow them to get out of the contract. They just have to break it because they change their mind. With that breach of contract, there's a couple of different ways that those are handled, and they're usually based on monetary issues. In that situation of a buyer getting cold feet, if they walk away, that seller has just lost however much time on the market. And now they may have a domino effect of if the seller of the home had already found their new home and they were in the process of buying that home, It could be that that closing is contingent on the money they're going to get from the house where the sale just fell through. So there are definite huge life altering fallout sometimes from these contracts falling apart, or breaches of these contracts. So there's as I mentioned, there's a couple of different ways that this is handled monetarily. So the first one is a rescission, where there is really no monetary repercussion to the party that breaches. It's just a cancellation of the contract where the parties are returned back to their original positions. Buyer gets their earnest money back, seller puts their home on the market, everybody moves on. In the situation I gave, that would not be the ending. But the next one is liquidated damages. So this would be the earnest money. When you write a contract, on the very first page, you're already agreeing to how this is going to play out. Is it going to be liquidated damages, or is it going to be specific performance, which is usually the basic options? Not specific performance, damages. So with liquidated damages, that would be them giving up their earnest money, which is a predetermined amount. Let's say it's $15,000. At this time that the contract is written, you've already said, if my client breaches this contract, they're going to give up $15,000. That's their penalty. So oftentimes that's how it plays out. It's quick, it's easy, and it doesn't open up your client to damages, which is a full lawsuit where the seller could say, you know what, 15,000 just doesn't cover it. Our mortgage is $7,000 a month. Let's say this is a fancy one, right? Our mortgage is $7,000 a month. We are now in default on our next home. So we're going to lose that because there's no way it's going to last in this market. So they've lost their home, which isn't even a monetary loss. Like that at that point is almost like civil, but it still can fall under these damages. And so they can sue them for more money than the earnest money. So when you're in the business, you'll learn more about that and how to protect your client from that situation. And then the last one is specific performance, where and this doesn't happen a lot, but where you end up going to court and the court orders the party in default to do what they agreed to do. That's a seller. It's legally forcing them to sell their home. If it's a buyer, legally forcing them to purchase that home. And again, this doesn't happen very often. Again, usually a breach of contract is handled by loss of earnest money. That's the typical repercussion there. Man, you guys, I feel like I was talking really fast and I didn't cover very much. I have done contracts in the past a few times, and I have uploaded those videos into the Facebook group. I'm going to drop that link in the chat so that if you're not a part of that group, you can become part of it. So give me just a moment to pull that up. While I'm doing that, do you guys have any questions? Anything I didn't cover or I didn't cover enough that I can help you with? And before we dive into that, I have to apologize. I feel like an absolute space case today. It's been a week and I feel kind of like I'm running low on the brain cells. So I have to apologize that you did not get me at my best tonight. But anyway, are there any questions that I can help you with?
That's okay. I got one. Well, first, I apologize for the noise I was potentially making because my tire took a nail and I can't get fixed. I'd get replaced. But anyways, can you get me refreshed on unenforceable? Because I have the idea with void and voidable, but unenforceable, the only part I got is the lack of writing on a contract makes it unenforceable by law.
Yes. So with unenforceable, so that's the one that has 3 ways that it, or 3 different scenarios that fall under unenforceable. So an unenforceable contract is a contract that cannot be proven in court, or the contract won't stand up in court. I mean, you can prove that maybe it existed, but it's not going to be held up. A judge is not going to enforce it. So those 3 things were the contents cannot be proven. So it's an oral agreement. Or, well, an example of that could be if, 2 examples. If you and an agent had a phone discussion about a property and you represent the buyer, you call the other agent and say, hey, my clients are going to write this up. We're going to do it at 500,000. Do you have a lot of other offers on the table? She's like, no, I don't have any offers. We're listed at 450. You guys, this market's insane. 500,000 should be compelling enough for the seller to take it off the market right now. So you write up your offer, you send it over, and you find out that it's already been sold. It wasn't necessarily a contract, but you guys did have a conversation about terms. Now, that is not enforceable. So if you wanted to, if you were pissed, because you had this whole conversation and then you spend, all this time crafting this offer, getting your clients excited, signing it, telling them you had this conversation with the selling agent or the buyer, the seller's agent, and then you find all this out. So that would be unenforceable. Because there's nothing anybody can do for you in that situation. It just sucks. Which is also why you never give your clients more hope than you have to. It's better to underpromise and overdeliver than build them up and get them all excited about an offer possibly coming in or their offer possibly getting accepted. Yeah, it's better off to not prep them for best case scenario, but to, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so unenforceable. Contents can't be proved, oral contracts. So that example would be one. Or if you had a valid contract, you represent the buyer, the seller has accepted the offer, you guys are in a great spot, and then you're at the inspection and the seller says that, oh, we'll leave all the pool furniture behind for the buyer. No problem, we'll do it as a courtesy. So you can't put that in the contract because the lender, they don't want to see that. So you're just kind of a spit and a handshake. So then you close, buyer shows up to the home and there's no patio furniture. There's nothing that the court's going to do for you because it was not in writing. So hopefully that makes sense. The second way that a contract can be unenforceable is if the other party has a voidable contract. So again, with voidable, that's a contract that has the ability to be voided. So if, for example, and this is a little bit convoluted, if, for example, a 17-year-old wrote an offer on a home and a week later, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is more than I can handle. I need to get out of this. They can get out of that because they are 17 years old. So yes, it's a contract that's voidable, but it's not. So a voidable contract is not necessarily unenforceable. But if the voidable contract is in fact voided, it also becomes unenforceable. Does that make sense? It's kind of like an if-then type situation. If the voidable contract is in fact voided, it then becomes unenforceable because the court is not going to uphold that contract because there is one of, because one of the parties has the ability to withdraw it. They have that legal right. So there's no legal repercussion for them exercising their legal right. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the third one is the statute of limitations has expired. My go-to example on this usually is and this happens. Let's say you have the home inspection and the inspector finds that the seals on a couple of the windows have broken, and they've got that kind of fog that happens in windows. So you can't fix that. They have to be replaced. So if there was a warranty on the window, it would make sense that the seller would go through the warranty or the window company to have those windows replaced under the warranty. And that takes forever. Like, it could take 2 months for something like, it could take longer for something like that to be taken care of. So instead of waiting to close, everybody may agree that we're going to go ahead and close, but these windows will be taken care of after closing. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's say 6 years later, the buyer, the owners of that home, still don't have their windows. They didn't follow up on it, or maybe they were following up on it and they were on top of it. They just never took it to the court level. If they wait until 6 years and a day to take that to the court level, it will have exceeded the statute of limitations. So it would no longer be enforceable by a court. But if they had gone like the week before, they would have been fine. So a contract does not die at closing. I guess I should have started with that. There are clauses in the contract that extend beyond the closing date. Nothing that's going to come back and bite anybody in the butt. But these agreements, like, just because the home has closed and you collected your commission check and your client moved in, it doesn't always mean you're done. They do still have these lingering things. And so something like this, I tell you what, if that were my agent and it had gone 6 years and they hadn't done any follow-up, I would have been pissed. So hopefully that little story helps. Remembering the window replacement. If you wait too long, they're not going to do it. They're not going to enforce that in court, and it'll just be like a too bad, so sad. Even if the seller agreed to it, that contract would be past its due, or his goodbye date. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, get back to your evenings. Again, thanks for muscling through this one with me. I apologize again for my scatterbrain. The next one of these that I am going to do, let me pull that up and I can let you know. Okay, the next one, I'm not doing one of these until March 9th. That's a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So I do have all of these dates posted in the Facebook group with the links to register, and I will reluctantly post this video in that group as well tomorrow. If you guys need anything or have questions, my info is on the back of that packet I uploaded, and it is also in the Facebook group. Just reach out and let me know what I can do. Have a great night. Thanks so much for hopping on with me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.